Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for making the time to join in on this call today. I see a few more people are still joining in, but we're hoping that we can start on time because this was a big ask. And so my name is Ebenezer Bachman. I'm the Director of External Relations at Ashesi. I will be moderating this session today with the Ashesi executive team. We have Patrick on the call. Patrick is president of Ashesi. We have the provost, Professor Angela Owusu on the call as well. We have our chief operating officer, Yasmin Bakno, the director of admissions and financial aid, Ms. Araba Botre, and the Dean of Students, Abdul Mahdi. And so I'm just going to do a quick explanation of the flow for today. So Patrick is going to do a quick intro, just speak a bit briefly about returning from his time off, his well-deserved time off, and then he's going to hand off to Professor Angela, who is going to walk through how Ashesi has navigated teaching and learning since we had to go online in March. Yasmin is going to speak a bit about operations and university financial health and continuity. And then we'll move to Q&A, and the entire exec team will be on the call. At 5 p.m., we will do an initial wrap up for people who may need to move on to join other meetings or join other calls. But the exec team will stay for an extra 30 minutes to answer any questions that people still have or clarify any comments from all of you. And so I'm going to hand off now to Patrick just to do a quick intro. Patrick, if you can hear us, can you give us a quick hello?
Yes, I'm here. You need to turn on my audio for me.
Okay. Okay, can you try now?
Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm here. Okay, good afternoon, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this call. It's great to be joining you just as I'm ending my sabbatical. As many of you know, I planned a sabbatical this year, starting in middle of January, ending middle of July. And I had a plan to travel to 4 countries and do a lot of things. Most of those things were cut short, except for the fact that I was able to go to Japan in January for intensive martial arts training, which is the first leg of my sabbatical. After that, back to Ghana and then grounded by the COVID-19 emergency. So I have been on sabbatical this whole time, with the exception of a few occasions when I've been on calls with the executive team and being on campus on one occasion as we were planning to close down the campus and move to online. I have really maintained discipline, if you want to call it that, of staying on sabbatical. And in fact, my mother thinks that COVID-19 has made me take a proper sabbatical, because in her mind, I would have been traveling all over the world instead of staying home and resting. So I'm well rested, looking forward to being back at work next week, starting on Wednesday. So just wanted to say, first of all, a very big thank you to the Ashesi community, and especially to the executive management team at the university. For me, as the founder of the organization, one of the really wonderful things about this period is being able to look at Ashesi from the outside and seeing it run so well under the leadership of my team. and I'm very proud of how the team has led the transition, how we've maintained our duty of care towards students, and how we've been very thoughtful about moving Ashesi forward. Just everything about the university, I think, has been running incredibly well. So before I get back to work next week, I'm actually looking forward to this conversation with the executive team and with some of our closest donors and friends to give you an update on how things are going and where we see things going in the future in the next few months and years. So on that note, I would like to call on Professor Angela Owusu-Ansah, who's the provost, to begin this conversation with the executive team.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning, good afternoon. This is Angela. Very briefly, I'll share how teaching and learning has been unfolding at Ashesi. Three main tiers: preparing, the actual doing, and then what is now emerging. So to prepare, we had a 2-week break where we, as Patrick just mentioned, we did plan. We planned, we strategized, looked at all the various ways in which we could the simplest path possible to make sure that we were still delivering quality education in a safe space and making sure that all the students were equitably served. One of the first things we did was with Araba's team, we got all the students safely back to their homes. That was the initial part. Then we decided that the best thing to do was make a clear distinction between what the section of the semester that has already happened and the semester that was about to begin online. That distinction was important because it helped us to refocus and use a different lens in administrating as well as teaching and giving the students the comfort to know that we knew their circumstances. We also knew the circumstances of faculty because school had to move into each person's house, and it was a totally different ballgame. The other thing that we were careful to do was to make sure that the scores and assessments were also clear and distinct, so that if there was any unique drop or hike in scores, we'd be able to trace to figure out what was the cause. Of course, that first week that we were planning, we did a lot of things to prepare faculty, customized training videos, develop frequently asked questions, cheat sheets, couple of days training, creating a peer support group where all the faculty members indicated how they could support each other with the different tools we had, coming up with a hotline team that was on call 24/7. It was made up of individuals who had skills in one of each of the 3 different tools we had, Camu, Canvas, and Zoom. And they supported both faculty and students. Then it was important to determine who we were teaching. We had to determine whether there were some who would defer or not. After a detailed follow-up on each student who had indicated that they might not have connectivity, we came to the conclusion, or they came to the conclusion, that it was worth their while to give it a shot. So out of about 129, which had initially indicated that they might defer, we ended up with 4. And even with the 4, after about a month in, they decided that they would give it a shot as well. So we ended up with 2 who had deferred. We created a master list. And in that master list, we had parent numbers, student emails, all the different kinds of information we needed. And that master list helped serve us and our different courses to be able to contact any student who missed a single class, 2 classes. We were on call, we were emailing you, we were contacting parents, and we were making sure that we were providing all the support you needed. This master list was also used by our coaching and our counseling team to help us to determine which students needed that unique help. We also reached out to parents, and I'm sure Dean Abdul will tell you more about that, to give students some space while they're at home. We also had a case-by-case, I met with the at-risk students. We identified students who were at risk, and on a weekly basis, I met with them to see how they were doing. We came up with a plan, an individualized plan to support them. Then we identified basic needs. There were some students who had faulty laptops and so on. Each student was given data, so were faculty, and so were the faculty interns. Some students, we provided some kind of accommodation, and Araba will give you more on that as well. We definitely provided psychosocial support. We modified our teaching and learning schedule such that students had a range of 72 hours to turn in assignments, hoping that within that feeling and believing that within that 72 hours, any issues with connectivity would be, resolved for that particular period. We provided a master calendar of all assignments, indicating the kinds of tools that will be used, the outcomes, the assessments, the readings, and the students loved that. We provided that every Friday. We got all the information on Friday from faculty, and then we provided it to all the students, and that helped them, depending on their circumstance at home, to manage all the assignments and the due dates, etc. Students who needed any kinds of, Dean Abdul organized student town hall meetings to keep the students informed of what was going on. Faculty also were given flexibility and time to figure out how best to use the new space they were working in. And they came up with some really innovative ways of teaching as well, identifying free software. There was a lot of free software available on during the COVID era, and we took advantage of it. We also had we had weekly meetings, we had WhatsApp groups. I had a daily checkup with everybody. We had weekly meetings, we had contacts on a regular basis. There was a lot of prescription and guidance during that period. We even had our annual faculty professional development with Bard College, leading us on how to be engaging in writing. There was a lot of material online as well from Harvard and all those other Ivy League and really prestigious universities, so as well as our partners, UC Berkeley, sending us tools that we could use. We revised the calendar definitely to add on the 2 weeks we lost. We made sure that we had an inactivity sheet, and that was run by the hotline, and they would call you if you were not participating. We realized that at the start of the semester, the semester during the COVID disruptive era, about 12% were inactive. It dropped to 9%, but by the time we were doing final exams, it was just 2% who were missing a class here or there. One good thing about this particular period was with our students on probation. We wondered, they did extremely well, and after probing, we found out that because classes were recorded and available to every student, international as well as local, they were able to play these modules over and over and over again. And so we got about 35% of the students who were on probation, 9 of them getting out of probation, and so on. And this was a good year for them. The graduation rates were similar to us being on ground. We did a few anecdotal assessments, and I'll just read you a couple. This is one student. I think online teaching and learning made our lecturers more accessible. Ashesi lecturers are already really friendly, but now here's the case: we could literally WhatsApp them at midnight and they would reply. I think all of us had some adapting to do, and our lecturers handled it really well. Here's another one. A number of my classes in the spring semester were very interactive, and our lecturers were able to get that interactivity across quite well. We found online substitutes for things that we could have done in the classroom, and that was really cool. the teaching experience has really shown me that our lecturers are really capable of a lot, and we don't give them as much credit as they deserve. And it goes on and on and on. So now for the emerging. Blended teaching is here to stay. There's no doubt about it. Either with WhatsApp or all the way up to sophisticated tools, it is, the faculty are enjoying it and the students are beginning to appreciate its value. We're looking at ongoing professional development to help faculty develop their technology skills, looking at perhaps giving faculty Zoom licenses, more software, things like styluses and iPads, earphones, instructional design training or an instructional design trainer to support faculty, universal design training, and a data bank to store all these pre-recorded modules, seeing as the students value it so much. And finally, perhaps looking at perhaps every student having a laptop would be one of the things that would make sure that the blended approach, which I'm convinced is here to stay, will be a success. That in a nutshell is how teaching and learning were, came about during the COVID period. And I will ask Yasmin to please continue.
Great, thanks, Angie. Hello, everyone. Welcome again, and thanks for making time for this call. I wanted to, I'm assuming everybody can hear me, Eben?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
If there's anyone who can hear, please click on the hand icon and I'll message you privately.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I wanted to just spend a little bit of time highlighting some of the logistical aspects of our response to COVID, and to briefly share about the university's current financial standing and sort of our assessment of the future. So as Angie mentioned before, Ashesi made a decision to close our campus about 4 months ago. And our priority at the time was to evacuate campus and get our students home safely. As many of you are aware, about 17% of our student population is international, and many of our local students come from remote parts of the country. And so where we could, and with support from some of our funders, we did assist with the logistics of getting students home. We had some students, international students in particular, about 24, who couldn't get home mainly because of borders closing. And for those students, we were successful in placing them with host families in Ghana. Our next priority after we evacuated the campus was really to figure out sort of the logistics of pivoting online, how best to roll out online instruction as well as remote work for our staff. And I think we've pivoted quite successfully. And some of that is attributable to the fact that Ashesi, even prior to the pandemic, had pretty good cloud-based infrastructure for collaboration and remote work. I think a new layer of challenge, though, that COVID introduced was how to deal with the internet bandwidth constraints. And in that regard, brokering relationships with some of the telcos in Ghana has been very helpful. Through those relationships, we've been able to do bulk distribution of internet data to students. And some of our key websites, like our learning management system, Canvas, which Angela mentioned, have been whitelisted. So our students and faculty don't actually incur internet charges when accessing those pages, and that has helped. As was also previously mentioned by Angela, we wanted to make sure that as many students as possible could participate in online instruction. And so where we could, we sent laptops, cell phones to students who needed them. And we're currently still supporting faculty and staff with internet allowances and other connectivity infrastructure to support remote work. All in all, I think it's all gone well, but obviously with power issues in Ghana and everybody mostly being on 4G, it hasn't always been seamless connectivity. The other piece that I wanted to mention was that from a logistical perspective, we're also paying attention to what's happening to our physical campus. We've kept key services like janitorial and landscaping, but on a limited basis, and have really worked with our service providers to ensure that their staff we're not unduly burdened by what's happening with the pandemic. So we are still paying those service providers to ensure that they can pay their staff. We've also got several catering companies on campus, 3 catering companies on campus who have lost business as a result of us shutting down. And we've offered to pay part of their salary bill, half of their salary bill over the past 3 months, and are in discussions with them about, how they're currently doing and how we might be able to offer some other forms of support as we plan for what's going to happen in the fall in terms of a potential campus reopening. Shifting gears to the finances. As of the first half of the year, the university is in pretty good financial standing. We earned 95% of our projected fees during the first semester. The balance of about 5% is essentially foregone housing income from closing our campus. In terms of expenses, we've actually generated net savings during the first half of the year by virtue of many of our running operating expenses reducing, right? So expenses like fuel and energy costs, travel expenses, some admin expenses, including marketing, since a lot of our student recruitment actually this year happened online. Furthermore, from a liquidity perspective, some of our funders have provided operating funding support, which has been helpful. And we were also able to negotiate a deferment of our patient capital loan repayment into next year, which has really helped also from a cash management perspective to date. Looking ahead, however, there is uncertainty. And I think there's several factors that have the potential to erode the surplus that we've been able to generate during the first half of the year. And I'd like to highlight at least just 3 of those factors. One of them is our parents' ability to pay. We're already seeing an uptick in financial aid requests, and we know that the pandemic will continue to have an impact on our families through 2021, at least. We've even preemptively decided not to increase fees for the next academic year. Our original plan was for a 2.2% dollar increment in fees for 2020. Another factor that will impact our finances has to do with how we will ultimately resume in the fall. Currently, we're pretty certain that most continuing students, so about 2/3 of our student body, will resume online. So there's already foregone housing fees. We're estimating about 40% of our projection of housing income will probably not materialize. But where there's still, where we're still trying to figure out the logistics and what's going to happen is for freshmen. And for freshmen, as well as a limited number of upperclassmen who absolutely need our campus infrastructure to study online, we're currently exploring the possibility of reopening our physical campus. And I can talk more about that later. I'm sure it will come up in the Q&A. But depending on how things unfold, we may not be able to enroll all freshmen in the fall. And obviously, if that happens, some of our tuition earnings for 2020 may defer into 2021, and we're monitoring that. And I think the third factor that I'd like to highlight that could sort of eat into the current surplus that we're in are investments that we're going to have to make regardless of the mode of instruction we resume in. For a hybrid online and on-campus model, which I was alluding to earlier, we're probably looking at about $250,000 to $300,000 of investment for things like PPE, COVID testing, and other expenses related to health and safety on campus if we are going to reopen our campus for students. There's obviously going to be continued internet bandwidth support that we have to contend with. We're also looking at, as Angela alluded to before, significant IT and other equipment investments to support online learning for faculty and students. So those are the 3 sort of big factors that we're looking at closely. And in conclusion, just pertaining to the finances, I think the long and short is that we have had a strong first half of the year that has put us in a good position and should cushion us and have us at a minimum breaking even through year end. However, the more prolonged this situation is, And the more our families are impacted, we're obviously monitoring the potential longer term negative impact to our finances. So I'll stop here, and Eben, hand back over to you to lead us into the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Yasmin. And thanks, Angela, as well, and Patrick. And so we have, I think if Abdul and Araba, everyone can just turn on their video quickly so we can do quick waves. We have a few questions, and we really wanted to make allow for as much time as possible to ask questions. And I'm going to share a quick screen just so people can see the options you have. And so you can type your questions into chat, or you can type into the Q&A. And I see some questions already from Abu. Or you can just raise your hand, and we'll allow you to ask your question directly. We'll just enable mic access. But I think we have a question now from Abu that we can start off with around regarding blended teaching being here to stay. What are the key gaps in educational experience between blended and full classroom, and how are we planning to address these gaps? So I think
thanks
maybe
for the question. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So with blended learning, it's, as you know, a mix of the technology as an instructional tool as well as face-to-face. Our faculty have figured out unique ways to blend the two. What we'll need is things like iPads and styluses for the math professors who need to quickly scribble an equation. Things like the earmuff type earphones versus the telephone ones that apparently are extremely painful to have on more than 6 hours. Training in instructional design or support in how to actually convert the in-face or on face-to-face instruction into an online version of it in a way that is developed by someone who understands the psychology of how to learn online. Some training in universal design to make sure that we are not leaving behind our students that have some learning disability or some other physical disability that might hinder or hamper their learning. What are we doing towards that? We're having conversations right now with faculty, like I said, identifying their needs, proper cameras, etc. So we've had this conversation with procurement in terms of the low-level, easy access type things, but the long-term training and mentoring on how to do it right. And we also do need to get our students to understand how best to make use of these new instructional technological tools. So training on both sides to make sure that we can optimize these new tools that I'm pretty certain that we didn't even scratch the surface of all the different things we could do with the tools we currently do have. So the training is first, and then additional, and moving into things like 3D for the engineering courses, etc. Also needs some kind of designer as well, or some kind of support there.
Thanks a lot, Angela. Yasmin, this one I think comes to you, where we, and for Abdul as well, Dean Abdul, were you expecting students to ask for a reduction of fees at some point, given this new teaching model, especially if this pandemic persists? So it goes to both you and Dean Abdul, Yasmin.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations internally about fees, and I think there are two ways to look at it. We've looked at fees within the context of families actually being impacted by the pandemic and financial situations changing for parents and families. And we've also looked at, the question about, are we offering something different, right, through a blended learning model? With respect to the first piece, the provision that we're really making to support families is really looking at being able to offer more financial aid. And we know that, students and families will be impacted. And so we're preparing for that rather than sort of a blanket reduction in fees. As pertains to the question around, blended learning, I think unlike perhaps models elsewhere where the intention is for it to be kind of delivered via online platforms, Ashesi has had to pivot from, physical delivery, and because of this pandemic, to something that is online. But in doing that, we're really sort of offering the same suite of services that we do when we are on a physical campus. In fact, we're having to commit, in many instances, more time and more resources to make sure that online works. And so within that context, in thinking through whether there should be sort of a reduction in fees that is aligned with perhaps a different scope of delivery that we're offering, at this time, our sense is that it makes sense to keep fees where they are, but rather to look at ways that we can, in a targeted way, support students who really are financially impacted by the pandemic. Abdul, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, really. I think you touched on all of it. But as Yasmin alluded to, the difference is many a times a program is set up to be online. And in that case, many of the things that go into setting it up is seen as, capital investment in the program. And they are going to, roll it out and then possibly have more students and then be able to capture the money in the future. But as Yasmin rightly alluded to, our program wasn't set up to be online. So many of the costs associated with, moving, to online, we are now feeling it right now. But we've had to have many conversations with students every step of the way to really explain to them what is happening. And if we've used this as an opportunity to bring the students along. So for example, the reopening, campus reopening committee, we have students on it that are part of the conversations. And these are as ASC, Ashesi Student Council leaders. So the hope is they are part of the conversation so that they're able to go back and then tell students, other students, what is really going on. And that has been really helpful from that standpoint.
Thanks a lot, Abdul. Arba, this is one for you. What has total enrollment been so far? Do we see any reductions expected? I think so. It's first of all students who are coming in, but also our existing student body. Do we see any? So I think maybe you can start from the incoming students end, and then Prof. Angela can speak to total enrollment.
All right, thank you, Urban, and welcome everybody. In terms of numbers, I'd like to start with the applications that we received. As of the end of June last year, we had received a total of 1,344 applications. End of June this year, 2020, we've gone up, we received 1,427 applications. So there is an upside to the applications received. We had done a total of 429 interviews as at last year, end of June. This year we've done 746. We had made offers of about 96 as at end of June 2019. We've made 123 offers as at the end of June. Enrollment at the end of June was 76, which was 23% of the incoming class. We currently have 85 confirmed, which is 26% of the incoming class. We received IB results just yesterday, and we've made an extra 30 offers. So we're way ahead of where we were last year by this time. So we don't actually foresee a reduction in terms of numbers of students coming in. Right, Evan?
Okay. Prof. Angela?
Very briefly, the current and the continuing students have not made any indication of deferring or taking a year off as a gap year. They are going along just as they normally do. Summer, they enrolled, asking about the next courses and so on. So we're on course there with the continuing students as well.
Okay. And this one is coming to you, Dinabdo. It's from Marian, asking about insights on the class of 2020. How was virtual graduation, or how did we close off the semester for that class, and how do we see employment prospects that they have?
Thank you very much, Marian. So we still haven't had the graduation yet. We sent a little survey to students to really understand how they want this year's graduation to be. And through the survey and then multiple conversations, they have their fingers and toes crossed that they are hoping that it would be face-to-face graduation. But what we've done is we've had exit, we have something in-house called exit interviews, which ends with a ceremony whereby we have companies and then president and then people that the students would like to hear from coming. And we did it this year via Zoom, which had them singing, and they had dancing competitions at the end. And then of course, Patrick had to cut his sabbatical short to come in and talk to them because they requested that he's part of it. But in terms of the graduation rate, for example, I think this year, based on what we have seen, it's about 86% students that have been able to graduate within 4 years, which is a bit an uptick of what we are normally used to. But the class is doing well. We anticipate some challenges definitely in terms of employment, but that has made career services, for example, setting up multiple conversations, making sure that we're talking to companies. There have been companies that have contacted me personally and then the career services office, basically saying that because of the way Ashesi was able to transition online, they believe that our students could be the ones that could help them do the same, right? So through this, we're still looking, but I'm hopeful that at the end of the day, we would be close to where we want to be. But the conversations are still going on. And Mariam, please, if you have some companies that are looking for, talented students, as we have, please feel free to send me a quick email, and I'll make the necessary.
Okay, so I think Abdul was going to say he would make the necessary introductions. So I think some internet challenges there, but Patrick Dunn, I see you had your hand up, and so please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much. And firstly, just to say how hugely impressed I am by how you've managed everything, and particularly in terms of supporting and engaging the students. I mean, hats off, great job, everyone. The 2 points I was sort of interested in to get your views on were, one is how scholarship providers reacting, and the second, which has partly been covered, around the employability. But I'm also interested in what more do you think could be done to engage employers and to support the young people at what will be probably globally the most difficult job market in our lifetimes.
So Arba, do you want to take a first shot at this?
Yes, so in terms of scholarship providers, we have not had any major shift in negatively. And I think one of our major donors has been very responsive with emergency funding to support the scholarship students during this COVID pandemic times. And so there's not been much change in that. In terms of the remote or employers, we did a pilot a couple of weeks ago. We've been trying to work with some of our scholars on remote employment, and we engaged some employers who have actually shifted what they were envisaging to be in-person work to online. And so some of our students have been engaged in remote work, and we had a session with some of the employers to get feedback on how that could be better, so possibly scaled up to engaging more employers. So that's from my end.
Yes, and I think Dean Abdul spoke a bit about the careers and employer feedback. But I think especially with scholarships, it's we have roughly 43% of our students who are on scholarships, who have been even more severely affected by the pandemic. And so ARBA has been fantastic. I've heard a lot of students talking about how the admissions office has been able to step in. And this was due to some of our existing stakeholders and partners really stepping up to support students at Ashesi who are already on scholarships. But then we're also seeing this new group of students who previously did not require aid, who are now having to request for scholarships, who we are also trying to work with partners to support. And we are receiving good feedback. Clearly, a lot of partners and scholarship providers understand that some of the people who would be most affected at this time are students. And so we are seeing different partners thinking through how they can really support not just Ashesi at this time, but also the students who have been severely impacted. And so I think it's good signs that everyone is recognizing the urgency of the current situation.
Thank you.
We have a question from Rich Lyons, and I think this one may come to you, Angela, who was asking if we are considering a freemium model where non-Ashesi students or even students who haven't yet applied to Ashesi can still take some classes from Ashesi as a way to get the Ashesi experience. Think of it like moving the Ashesi innovation experience online. And are we thinking through any plans like this?
We've touched on it about how we could be more creative. But I think once the conversation moved into focusing on how best to move the first year students to campus, we didn't pursue that path. But we did kind of brush, very briefly about considering more creative ways to make the online work. Having said that, should in all our planning and brainstorming, should there be a need or a group of students who are first year students who request that we do something online, we will revisit that brainstorming and come up with something like that. But for now, we have put that on, we shelved that idea.
And just since you're on now, Angela, just there's one more. Do you have feedback? This is from Paul Stoddard, who is joining us, who has been at Ashesi in the past. Do you have feedback from students regarding their satisfaction with online classes? And he also adds Ashesi is doing a great job.
Say, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
He also adds that Ashesi is doing a great job.
Oh.
So the faculty and the team.
I think Dean Abdul might have more depth and knowledge of that, but the little I have, we did a very mini anecdotal version of that, is what I shared. The responses that the students shared with us, for the most part, those who were not facing serious accessibility challenges, situations at home that made it very difficult for them to access and have connectivity, for the most part, the students were okay with and satisfied with what they had. Those who had some challenges naturally would not like to have that experience again.
Angela, could you just speak briefly to whether we are doing anything to mitigate the students' the negative experiences?
So one of the things we did while it was happening, for example, and Araba touched on it, was with some support from our some of our donors, we were able to pretty much DHL laptops to replace faulty laptops, purchase phones for those who needed it, even move some students who were in very dire living situations into a house where we have 2 students living now, where Araba provided them with all the domestic stuff they would need and so on. So we've had the opportunity to really see through this COVID time some of the sufferings that some of our students really go through. And it has made us aware of, you know, we took it for granted, at least I know I did. But this new awareness is in itself something that we will look into going forward. I don't know how broad it is. Once again, Dean Abdul will have that better than I will to kind of give us a picture of, is it something that we can manage and actually mitigate even more than the ones that we became aware of and did do something about. So I'll ask Dean Abdul to please, Dean Abdul, if you can add to what I just said, I'd really appreciate it.
Provost, thank you. So that's one of the main reasons why, in terms of the reopening that we're looking at, we're actually looking at students that experience, especially who had difficulty in accessing the online, to be on campus too. So the thinking, at least for now, is to have the first year students on campus and then leave some of the space for continuing students who you know, went through some of the things that Provost mentioned. So they are top of mind for us, and we want to make sure that things that we can do to support them from that end, we do it. Just a little one, ASC had sent out a survey recently to students trying to understand if they wanted, you know, online or in person, and then all of those, of course, considering everything that is going on. And for the most part, you know, it was between hybrid and online. Most people, I think if you put it together, about 75% of them opted for that one. But I mean, we are trying to do our best to make sure that things that students went through, the difficulties, those that we can support and help, we give them the support that they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Abdul. So we have one question from Stavros Yanuka, who is the CEO of WISE in Qatar. And he's asking, blended learning is probably a longer term trend in higher education. Does Ashesi plan any investments in enhancing its online capabilities? And might this also be an opportunity to also increase enrollment? And so I know, Prof. Angela, you've spoken quite a bit about it, but if you want to.
Just a little bit more. Yes, there's no doubt about it that we can't go back. Blended has moved into the new space. Like I said previously, I'll share one quick story. One of our math professors called me and said, when we go back to campus, can we still do this? And then he goes on to explain that it allows him to actually think through what he's going to teach. Because before he does the recording over his PowerPoint, the voiceover, you know, he kind of scripts it. He does that. He sends the links to the students, a kind of a flipped kind of classroom. The students have this math lesson sent to them. They have time to grapple and think over it. And then when they do meet, he puts them in different rooms and he goes from room to room to room, asking Socratic questions. And the students are grappling and thinking through math. And he says he hasn't gotten that much engagement and that much good thinking as he has, I mean, in this instance, in comparison to in the classroom with all of them there. And so he really wants to hold on to this. I share this to say that whatever tools we have now will allow for that, but definitely if it could be increased or further made more sophisticated, that would be great. I think I've lost my thought of thinking here. The question was, what else do we want added, or what was the question again? I went off on the story and then I kind of got lost in it.
Stavros was asking about the investments.
We haven't really talked, we've talked about the immediate needs as to be honest, we don't even know exactly what we'll need to do a good blended job. We haven't gotten to that point of thinking it through and setting up a list of things that we will need. We will need someone who has expertise in instructional design and all of that to better help us, yes. So yes, we will need some investment in that for sure.
Just as a follow-up to this question, and this will probably require your support as well, Dean Abdul, who's the Dean of Students. It is clear, this is from Bright Simmons, it is clear the efforts being made to pivot instructional design to digital, and there are a lot of off-the-shelf tools to help with that. But what about the co-curricular and extracurricular content? It seems generally current digital tools are not very well suited for this. And then as part of that question also from Bright, regarding revenue, is there room to increase enrollment to generate income, more income as a means of offsetting some of the tuition fees? And I'll let the Chief Operating Officer, Yasmin, handle that. And so once you're done with that, then we'll go to the very third one from Bright, who's asking, is there anything that hasn't worked as well as we planned? So I'll let you start off, Dean Abdul.
Thank you very much. You're absolutely right in terms of its impact on the core curricular activities. And that's something that we talk about regularly. But what we're trying to do is to basically be able to move most of those online. So I'll give you an example. As we sit here speaking, there is shadowing going on. So students are shadowing companies and basically, following people. This is a system that we have that for the most part, all our first year students are asked to get the opportunity to learn, to use it to learn about, work space. We started it last year and it's still going on, just that it's being done remotely online. We have a mentoring system or a mentoring support that we have gotten more people now than we did last year in terms of companies and then different people that want to support or mentor our students. And this means that these people, companies, are having conversations with our students on a weekly basis. So that is going on. Internships are still going on. As we are part of global organizations like Open Society University Network, the Austin Network, Melton Foundation, that talks about global citizenship. There is multiple competitions that are going on now as I sit here, trying to help students to think through how they can be more productive during these times. Many of our students, I got an email, I think a couple of days ago that I shared with Ibn, a student of ours, Clarice, who is in Kenya, who had, true support of, she's been able to raise money to build a library. And the library currently is a shelter to many people in this space. what is going on is because it's raining now, the rains are messing up some of the books and they are pushing some of the people that are using the library as shelter. So she reached out and said, and asking, how can we support her on that? Of course, I contacted Eben. Eben is going to talk through with his office to see how we could help in her raising funds to support initiatives like that. And this is just one of the many initiatives that are going on. Students are very in tune with what is going on. And if anything, it's helping them expand the way they see giving back to the community more now than ever. And for the most part, we have conversations, and I genuinely believe that at the end of this all, even though nobody can see the end, students are going to use this opportunity and learn and then grow so much from it.
Right, and so there was a second part of that question, is there room to increase enrollment? Yeah. So this is for both the Provost, Prof. Angela, and Director of Admissions, Araba.
I'll go first. Sorry, Araba, I thought you were going to go. So what I have seen has become a great harvest for us is we've had an opportunity to increase the capacity of faculty with this online blended approach, where our partners and other universities are willing to teach part-time to support us. Now, with them being, increasing the faculty capacity, that would encourage and make it possible for us to have more students. So I'll leave that to Araba in terms of whether she can bring more, but we're seeing that we're having a lot of interest with great professors being willing to be part-time remotely. So our capacity in teaching has increased.
Well, talking about bringing on board more students, I believe there is the potential. However, there's a caveat. Much as we can bring a lot more students, I also see the possibility of more students asking for some amount of aid. Right? There are people who are willing to pay, but we have a larger section of those applying looking to some form of aid. So yes, we can bring on more, but we may need help from our partners and friends in supporting maybe some more scholarships. Not full scholarships as it were, but some level of funding at some point. Yeah.
So Araba, just to piggyback on that, a question comes out: how can our community, how can everyone on this call contribute to Ashesi at this time? How can people engage and partners engage with Ashesi at this time?
I think one of the things, aside supporting with funding for scholarships, will be to let us share ideas on innovations as you learn about them, to help us as we also try to innovate. So definitely funding is important for scholarships, partial scholarships, but then again, sharing innovations on what you learn from others, just so we can also try to replicate or even do better. Yeah. And Eben, talking about funding, I think there's one thing that I really, really want to share. It was from a student, just to buttress I call it the ripple impact of the scholarship funding that we tend to take for granted. A student wrote to me and said, "Good afternoon, Auntie Araba. I really want to say a huge thank you to you and the foundation team. I have become the breadwinner of my family because all schools have been closed, and my mother, as a teacher, is not receiving any income since teaching is the only work she does. I am so grateful, Auntie Araba, especially during this hard time of COVID-19. you are not only supporting Mastercard scholars, but you're supporting many other people through them. This was when she received a stipend to help her feed and data to get her to go online. And she's saying that beyond herself, there's 7 of them in the family, and she's using this money. So we cannot overemphasize the importance of funding and the rippling impact it has on families. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Arba. I'm aware that the time flew by very fast. I'm aware it's 5 p.m. And so I know some people may need to jump off at this point, but I just wanted Patrick to just chime in quickly before we resume the extra 30 minutes to continue answering some of the questions that we have, and allow some of the people who also have their hands up to also ask questions. And so Patrick, do you want to just share some quick thoughts for people who have to jump off the call?
Well, so just a very brief comments, just to say that Ashesi is fully engaged, that our mission doesn't change. And certainly COVID-19 has not changed our mission, and we continue to execute to really accomplish that mission. And we take very seriously our duty of care for students, but we've also been careful about staff members, and you know, just some of the things that we've done, as Yasmin mentioned, that we made sure that we were able to continue to pay salaries of support staff, including staff who are not really working because the campus is closed. So janitorial staff, security is still functioning, cafeteria staff, and so on. And I think all of that is really part of our mission, that we're taking care of the team. One thing that was not really highlighted a lot, but which I think is very important, is that as we were supporting students to work from home, there were students that needed funding just to be able to feed themselves. And so these are students whose scholarships at Ashesi covered room and board. And when we helped them get back home, we also made sure that they had fundings for their upkeep. So funding not only to get them data access, but even just meals and so on. And so those kinds of grants made possible by donors have been incredibly helpful to our response to this crisis. Now, moving forward, we're going to do a lot more, actually. So Ashesi's long-term is going to be ambitious. So we're going to, for our next 10-year plan, be looking at how we really try to facilitate systemic change. And so our strategy for scaling our impact is working through other universities, and a project that we started to engage other universities across Africa is going very well. That transitioned this year to online as well. So we were able to give assistance to peer institutions, sharing what we had done online and helping them also execute remote learning effectively. And our strategy moving forward is to really scale that up. And so we're going to set up sort of a hub system so that we will be a hub in West Africa, but set up a hub in East Africa and a hub in Southern Africa, with the goal that over the next 10 years, we will be affecting through other universities about 2 million students through this work. We're also going to work to expand Ashesi, so we will grow in place here in Ghana. This will involve additions to our academic programs, both undergraduate and graduate programs. And then finally, we're going to be looking at really enhancing sustainability of this institution. So really getting into funding an endowment and growing an endowment for the institution, and making sure that we've really planted Ashesi on very firm very firm ground. So COVID-19 has been a disruptor in some ways, in a negative way, but also it's turned out it's been a disruptor in a positive way as we're learning more about how to do effective online learning. And that's going to open up opportunities. And some of the questions that were asked about whether we can reach more students are exactly the kind of thinking that we're going to be doing as we plan the growth of Ashesi. So on that note, thank you to everybody who has to sign off now, but we will remain open for another 25 minutes or so so that we can continue to answer your questions. Eben, over to you.
And I do need to add for people who have to step off the call that different members of the team will be reaching out to you to help clarify or answer any questions you may have that has not yet been answered on the call. I see Peter Voika has his hand up, and so I'm just going to allow. Hi, Peter. If you can just unmute your mic.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly, Peter.
Well, first of all, I have to say congratulations. I mean, listening to this for an hour now, I think this is amazing what you have achieved and what you have done. If I look around the world, how people have coped with COVID-19. I have 2 kids in the US, 2 grandkids in college, and I have some doubts whether their colleges did as well as Ashesi did. And Ashesi has a much more difficult situation. You know, you talked about the technology not available everywhere. You had to send out computers, et cetera, et cetera. Patrick has answered my question in a way already. My question is, wouldn't it be worthwhile to somehow write down this story, how you did crisis management, so that other universities could benefit from that, the universities you are talking about? And I also think it could be very much used as a classical example, again, how well Ashesi is doing for fundraising. I mean, I think it's a remarkable story how you guys have really managed this crisis. That was my comment.
Peter,
Thank you very much, Peter.
Yeah, that's a fun, and we will chronicle the experiences that we've been through over the last few months, and I think in the months ahead. So thanks a lot for the feedback and for mentioning that. I see that we also have Harriet also has a hand up. Harriet and Mr. Arthur. Harriet.
Hi, everybody. This is Harriet. Look, Eben, I'm just listening to this conversation, and I first of all just want to say, you people really deserve to feel proud of yourselves. I think it's all been said, the level of thinking that you've done through this and even thinking ahead of this really deserves to be commended. And thank you for the opportunity for us to listen in. As I was listening, one of the things I picked up was this ideas of mentoring and your students shadowing corporates so they get familiar with workspace. I can't immediately give an offer, but I would like to engage to see how both for my firm, but also other firms I'm connected to, I can work with Ashesi to see how the students are given the opportunity to experience some real workspaces. But you people have done a phenomenal job. Great job, team.
Thank you so much, Harriet. Thank you so much. So we have a question from Melerick. I hope I got the name right. Melerick Mitchell, who is asking, and I think this one will go to the provost, Professor Angela. How are students adjusting to working on group projects that require labs and laboratories?
So during this period, there was a lot of free software, including software that would allow for simulation. And so for the most part, the lab and the hands-on work was done through simulation. The group work was done, we provided a tool and guidance on how to conduct group work. And so that was also possible. The other thing we did was, or that we tested towards the end, was to have one of our lab technicians in the lab doing the lab project, and students watching and commenting on what was going right, what was going wrong. And we think we might do that more often. So those are the two things we did. We had the simulations, and then we actually had instances where they actually had to write it through and think it through in writing. They had to kind of write the practice for some of them. That was another thing that we did. It wasn't perfect, but it did give them ideas on what it could be. So in a nutshell, that's my response to that. Did I answer the question, Eben?
Yes, Angela, I think, and if Merrick is still on the call, he'll probably do a follow-up, but thanks for taking the time to answer that. We have one, I think, question from Johnny McNulty. Dean Abdul, you had spoken a bit about some of the projects that students are engaged in now in response to COVID-19 and how Ashesi is trying to support them. But Johnny McNulty is asking for some more examples around how students are responding to the crisis outside of school, and if there are any other ways in which Ashesi is working to engage with them.
So I'll start from here. ASC, Ashesi Student Council, for example, I was here minding my own business, and a student reached out to me and then said that she's gotten, it's not a scholarship, but she's gotten $500 support from ASC. So this is Ashesi Student Council taking it upon themselves to pool money together. And then they've put in a little questionnaire or survey of some sort, sent it out to students for students to basically fill out a short one. And they are reviewing and on their own, giving students money. And this student was a student who was, she lives in a one-bedroom with the entire family. So the mom and then 3 other siblings. The mom is a petty trader. So because of the COVID, isn't able to work. And therefore they can't pay their rent, basically. And again, so this is just one example of group of students and what students are learning out of what is going on as a whole. And again, I didn't tell them to do that. They basically decided to do this on their own. I didn't know anything about it. So it's not Ashesi telling students to do A, B, and C. But it's about them learning through this COVID, empathy, and all the things that we started the semester with in terms of resiliency. Last year in the fall, we came up with T-shirts that had resiliency written in front of it. Of course, none of us knew what was going to happen to actually get the students prepared for COVID. If we knew COVID was coming, I guess we would have written the resiliency in more stronger or in capital letters. But it's been so helpful in letting students really understand how they bounce back, how they are able to self-discover themselves and actually help others. And there are many examples like that across, from students, from staff, from faculty. Students are really saying that they've, as Prof. Angela mentioned, having seen that level of engagement with faculty. And all of these are things that students are learning from directly, from staff, from faculty. So again, it's across the board, and it's, for the most part, it's not us leading it. It's not me, it's not my office. A student last week had a webinar on her own, where she brought in one of our companies. She contacted us for a company. A company was having resume building, and it's open not just to students, but to many people who at this time have lost their jobs and want an opportunity to rewrite their resumes for opportunities, right? So many things and many examples upon examples that students are taking initiative and leading it from their own point of view.
Thanks a lot, Dean Abdul. And Provost Angela, I'm going to reach out to you again, but we have a comment from Jonathan Becker, who is one of our colleagues at our partner college, BARD, under the Open Society University Network. And he's speaking about how thrilled they have been with the partnership with Ashesi, and believe that you and William in particular have been outstanding partners. But I know BARD has also enabled some students to participate in civic engagement at this time. And I don't know if you would just wanted to speak a bit to that in follow-up.
Very briefly, OSUN had this competition for students to kind of delve into civic engagement at this time. And as we had hoped, our students did very well in their participation. And the next part of it is to move into a section where those who won, will form a network to be able to better impact the remaining other competitors. There was 300 submissions for the competition, and there were 10 awards, and Ashesi won one. Yes, so we are we're doing well there as well.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Prof. Angela. This question is from, I think I'll combine one question from Judith Stoddard and Philip Clay. And this one would be coming to our Chief Operating Officer, Yasmin. Judith is asking that she heard you speak briefly about plans for the fall, the September semester start. Could you just speak a bit more to the thinking that Ashesi is currently going through for that semester? And also, Phil Clay is asking, which I would have you answer after Yasmin, Prof. Angela, do you expect to have problems with bringing faculty to campus? So over to you, Yas.
Thanks, Evan, and thanks, Judith, for the question. So I think plans for the fall semester are still being developed. There are a lot of moving parts that we're trying to unpack. And I think, as Dean Abdul alluded to before, we're really drawing from a cross-section of people across the university, as well as student input, to craft our plans. At the moment, I do think that we can say with some certainty that probably most of our continuing students will resume online in the fall, given the situation in Ghana with the pandemic. And as I mentioned before, I think where we're still trying to really unpack the logistics is what happens to freshmen. Unlike, continuing students, freshmen obviously need to sort of integrate into the Ashesi way and into our systems. And so in our thinking, that's been the group that has been sort of prioritized in a scenario where we can, in fact, physically resume on campus. And then the other group of students that we're looking to prioritize to be on campus are students who, would not be able to access online education due to, internet bandwidth or other constraints. We've got capacity for a maximum of 336 students on campus, just given our dorm space and maintaining social distancing. And so the way that we're generally thinking about it is that to accommodate both groups, we may have to split the freshman cohort and have an intake potentially in September, and then another intake either in October, November, or as far back as January. And we're still trying to unpack the logistics of that. There are some pieces that add complexity to what we're dealing with. Number one, all the certification examinations for West Africa, the certification examination for West Africa, the WASI, is delayed. And so we don't have results yet for all of our students to be able to enroll them. So that has an impact on the way that we're thinking about timing. Another piece is also just what's happening to borders. And so for international students, we're still monitoring the dynamics, but there's a very real possibility that we're not going to be able to bring everybody in September. So the plans, as I mentioned, are still being developed and are tentative, but those are some of the pieces that we're currently grappling with. And I hope that gives you a sense.
I think that it also helps to point out that even though some of the continuing students will be on campus, those that need to be on campus for reasons of internet connectivity and so on, that even though they'll be on campus, they will be taking remote classes. So the faculty who are teaching continuing students will all be teaching from home online. The faculty that will have to come to campus for in-person classes will be those teaching freshman courses, and particularly freshman courses for the first semester. So just to answer Phil's question, we actually only need a very small number of faculty to come on campus to teach in person.
Yeah, to add to that, we're even thinking of not having the full load for the first semester, probably 2 or 3 classes, making it even smaller.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we have one question from Emer. I think Patrick addressed that around the role Ashesi is playing in working with other universities on the continent. And Patrick spoke briefly about the education collaborative and how we've been running it, and this year's particular emphasis on online learning and how institutions could pivot. And I think the collaborative continues to organize training sessions together with Ashesi faculty to help peer institutions and other institutions that are interested to shift online and adopt new tools for teaching and learning. There's a question from around, has there been any feedback regarding screen and digital fatigue by both students and faculty? And I think this one comes back to you, Prof. Angela.
Because of the problems with connectivity, everything was pre-recorded or post-recorded or recorded while it was happening. And the timelines for doing the work was kind of spread out more than typically. And so you were not synchronous for long. And even when you were asynchronous, it was at the times and at the time we had connectivity. So with that in mind, roughly, I have a feeling that screen fatigue has not yet set in and hopefully will not set in.
Thanks, Prof. There's a question from Jan, who's just trying to get a bit of a sense of how COVID-19 is really behaving on the ground in Ghana, the environment and how Ghana and our students are dealing with the pandemic, just beyond Ashesi. And I'm not sure if maybe that would go to, if Araba is on, our Director of Admissions. Araba, you speak quite a bit with students. And Dean Abdul, if you could just address that briefly.
Thank you, Aben. I think from my end, the students I've been speaking with, there's mixed feelings. Most of them would love to be on campus. Most of them, they miss that community engagement and that feel of being together. But they also have received enough information, counseling, guidance from the health team and the student services team, such that they know what to do and they are taking precautions, right? So one of the things has been the numerous Zoom meetings to foster a sense of community among maybe cohorts, class of 2022, 2021. So it mitigates that sense of loss. But generally speaking, they're dealing quite well and taking care of themselves. But the general situation in Ghana, as we all know, numbers keep going up. Caution is always being advised. And we just hope that as we continue to talk to our students, they will be able to navigate the situation.
And I think there's also been a bit of mixed messaging broadly, not just in Ghana, but around the world on precautions people should take. And so in Ghana, for example, there's a lot of emphasis on wearing the masks and being safe. Infections keep rising, but we're also seeing a lot of, seniors are back in school and there's concern that there could be outbreaks in high schools. There's also a voter registration exercise happening in Ghana now where the Electoral Commission is essentially asking people to re-register because they're trying to clean up the voter database. And that's also causing quite a bit of concern because it's requiring people to convene in different locations across Ghana to register. And so there's a bit of apprehension around whether how soon Ghana can slow down the spread. But what may be a positive is we are seeing a remarkably high number of people recovering or being reported as having recovered from the virus. Some people, unfortunately, have passed away, but the larger number of people are recovering from the virus. And so it's a constant shift between how safe are we, our immune systems predisposed to help us beat the virus, etc. But students are also grappling with that as well, and I'm sure their families are grappling with that as well. So I think there's a question from Peter again. I'll let you chime in, Araba, around restrictions for international students. I know we've already mentioned that borders are closed, so international students may not be able to come into Ghana immediately. But Peter is also asking if we are seeing a possible demand for online-only study programs at Ashesi.
Currently, we haven't seen that demand for online. The students that I have spoken with, most of our international students, are actually looking forward to returning to campus as and when the government regulations allow. And so I'd say pretty much international students are looking to come, but then we're not sure what is going to happen. Borders are not open yet, and we don't know for how long it will stay closed.
Right. Thanks a lot, Araba. I can see that we are at a 5:30 mark. It's been really great. I see 28 people still on the call. Thanks so much for spending an entire hour and a half with all of us during this chat. Really appreciate it. You got invitations to this from different members of the Ashesi team, and we're going to be reaching out to continue the discussion and the conversation. If you have any questions, you can still send them to us. But I wanted to really respect the time of everyone on the call and bring it to a wrap here. Thank you so much. We look forward to further conversation. And please, if you have any questions about Ashesi, please let us know. And please continue to spread the word about Ashesi and advocate on our behalf. I think partner community has been immensely helpful in helping us navigate this period, and we have nothing but gratitude for it. I'm going to ask any of the members of the exec team if they have quick last words to share just before we end the call.
Well, Eben, I just want to say a big thank you to our partners and friends of Ashesi especially the Alma Foundation, MasterCard, who have stepped up their game in these times to help us in terms of supporting not just Ashesi as an institution, but our students. And I look forward to many more support from other partners and donors. But thank you, really. And this has been amazing working with all of you. Thank you.
All right.
So I'd like to say a big thank you as well to all our donors and our friends, especially at this difficult time. And I also want to say a very big thank you to you, the members of the executive team, for holding the fort these last 6 months. It's been really great to see Ashesi executing so incredibly well. And it gives me a lot of confidence and hope for the future that we're building such a strong team at the university. And now, of course, the students are not on this call, but also very, very, very pleased about how well our students have handled this situation. I think they deserve a lot of credit for Ashesi's execution.
Prof. Angela, do you want to have the last word?
No, my boss has the last word.
All right. Okay. So thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And please, we will be reaching out some more. So goodbye and have a great day or great evening, depending on where you are. Goodbye.
Thanks, Eben.
Thanks, Eben. Bye, everyone.
Bye.